Hello.
I was in New York with my everyone was out there, so I had a gift for the day. Yes, please do. Let me. Coming in.
Check. 1, 2.
Yeah, we're meeting a lot.
Statistics to death of not editing out.
Why?
But if you need it, we still can insert.
Yeah, but I needed it.
You use the current edition.
Huh?
You won't have it up with
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, Ambassador Udo, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Nigerian Embassy, and your colleagues from the Nigerian Embassy, good afternoon. My name is Johnnie Carson, and I'm filling in this afternoon for Ambassador Howard Wolpe, who regrettably is unable to attend. On behalf of Ambassador Wolpe, I am extremely pleased to welcome all of you to the Woodrow Wilson Center this afternoon for what I think will be an outstanding program on Nigeria. Nigeria is the most important country in West Africa, and certainly one of the one or two most important countries on the continent. As the chair and most prominent member of ECOWAS, Nigeria has championed greater economic and commercial integration throughout West Africa and has been at the forefront of peacekeeping operations in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and also crisis prevention efforts in Togo and Sao Tome. Beyond West Africa, Nigeria has been a strong voice for the entire continent. Nigeria's President, Olusegun Obasanjo, has been a leading advocate for NEPAD, the New Economic Partnership for African Development, and more recently the economic recommendations of the Blair Commission on Africa. Because of its enormous hydrocarbon resources, Nigeria is also a key player in the global energy sector and one of America's major suppliers of petroleum products. Today, Nigeria provides approximately 10% of America's petroleum needs and our largest source of low-sulfur sweet crude. Nigeria's regional, continental, and global significance frequently overshadow the many internal economic and political developments that are occurring inside of that country. As the most populous and diverse country on the continent, Nigeria faces a vast array of social, economic, religious, regional, and governance challenges. Since the election of President Obasanjo and the return to multi-party constitutional democracy in 1999, Nigeria has experienced 6 years of democratic rule, the longest period of uninterrupted civilian rule in the country's 45 years of independence. We are extremely privileged this afternoon to have with us the Vice President of Nigeria, the Honorable Atiku Abubakar. Vice President Abubakar has been an active and articulate member of the Nigerian executive leadership team that has been responsible for dealing with the challenges facing Nigeria and in managing the transformation that is occurring in his country. Vice President Abubakar was selected to serve as Nigeria's Vice President in 1999 following the election of President Obasanjo. He was reappointed to a second term following the 2003 national elections. Before assuming his current position, Vice President Abubakar was the governor of Adamawa State in northeastern Nigeria. A strong and longtime supporter of constitutional democracy, Vice President Abubakar was a founding member of the ruling People's Democratic Party and one of Nigeria's most outspoken opponents of the military dictatorship of the late Sani Abacha. Along with President Obasanjo, Vice President Atiku Abubakar has been at the forefront of Nigeria's efforts to promote reform and transformation at home and peace and stability in West Africa. It is my great pleasure to introduce you this afternoon to Vice President Abubakar. Mr. Vice President.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Ambassador for his wonderful introductory remark and to appreciate his very kind words about my country, about our President and myself. Let me say it's my pleasure to inform you that among guests listening to me this afternoon is my governor. I was once described as the governor of Adamawa State, but my current governor is now here with us this afternoon, Mr. Boni Haruna. He was actually my deputy when I was elected in 1999 and stepped into my shoes and then re-elected again. Let me say I am extremely highly honored for this opportunity to speak to you at this most important forum. I like to especially thank Woodrow Wilson Center and particularly Ambassador Olpe for extending a very kind invitation to me to speak to you. I also like to appreciate the very kind contributions of Dean Goodman of the American University for facilitating this invitation today. I wish to most profoundly express the same gratitude to the entire center for agreeing to invite me and to give me this unique privilege to share with you our aspirations as an emerging democracy. Nigeria, I'm happy to report to you, has made tremendous progress in the last 6 years towards taking her rightful position among the community of nations who not only practice democracy, but also have respect for the rule of law. We hope to continue to build on this progress in the coming years so as to ensure the deepening of democratic norms and ideals. Because of a number of reforms we have introduced, there is need for sustainability and continuity of those reforms. I recall that in the most difficult moments of our recent history, the government and people of the United States, along with most of the civilized world, stood by the Nigerian people as we fought a brutal military dictatorship, the recent of which was that of General Sani Abacha. Before then, of course, we had several other military dictatorships. Without your diplomatic and material assistance, that struggle would have been more difficult for us in Nigeria. We remain grateful to the American people for that support. Of course, Nigeria has been America's friend for a very long time. Our people share your values of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. We have looked up to America for the most efficient ways and means of building a better, equitable, and prosperous nation. That is why we fashion our presidential system of government, along yours. That is why also our educational system is substantially copied from your own, and other many elements of our system. In this area, I, for one, looked to American University here in Washington, D.C. to assist me in building an American-style university in Nigeria, the Abti American University, the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa, whose first intake will commence their courses this September. As I said earlier, our presidential political system was influenced by your own, and we continue to pay close attention to how you resolve questions of nationhood, self-determination, state-federal relationships, social diversity, and international cooperation. We shall continue to be America's friend, working with you on bilateral and multilateral issues as we have been doing. We shall continue to work with you to end impunity and defend human rights in Africa and elsewhere. We shall also continue to work with you to strengthen multilateral organizations in order to create better societies and also a better world. We shall continue to work with you to fight international terrorism. In doing so, we will ensure that continuity and sustenance of our democracy and the reform and development of our economy. Therefore, some of the most important issues that will shape the direction of our country and which no doubt will occupy an important space in our future policies and actions include the deepening and strengthening of democracy and protection of human rights, consolidating and further advancing our economic reform agenda, resolving the Niger Delta situation, studiously fighting corruption, graft, and inefficiency in the conduct of our public life, strengthening our role as a stabilizing force in the sub-region and the continent, and advancing Nigeria's bilateral relations with other countries across the world. Let's now discuss democracy and human rights, particularly in Nigeria since 1999. 1999 marked one of the triumphant moments of the country's history. It triggered a deluge of hopes in the future of the country and great expectations in the accomplishments of a democratically elected government. This is quite apart from the fact that its citizens, for their new freedoms and rights in a democracy and hopes for improvement of their lives by a government they freely elected. Thus, one of the celebrated attributes of democracy is the opportunity provided to citizens to enthrone a responsive and responsible government that ensures national development and stability of the polity through good governance. To us, as it is to most people of the world, there is no alternative to democracy. However, we are aware that there are a number of limitations in our practice of democracy, due in part to the peculiarities and unique exigencies of our own environment, cultures, and also experience. No two national democratic experiences could be the same, so long as we have differences in national circumstances. Our limited experience with democratic governance over the last 6 years necessarily imposes on us unique restrictions which we would overcome only by our own self-devised solutions, emanating from our distinctive circumstances, strengthened by a hand of cooperation from countries like the United States that have practiced democracy for over 200 years. We request of you only a hand of brotherly cooperation and partnership, not, as in the popular parlance, a handout of assistance and foreign aid to guide us in our onerous task of nurturing democracy and development. Our electoral systems and practices constitute one of the critical areas that such a hand of brotherly cooperation and partnership would assist us in overcoming the evident shortcomings. In the last 6 years, of course, we have had 2 elections, 1999, 2003. We expect through your own support and assistance, the 2007 elections will be better than the 2003 elections. The conduct of elections, so vital in leading to a peaceful and orderly passing of the baton of leadership from one government to the next, and from one person to another, in a manner acceptable to all contestants of power, has always been fraught with limitations and dangers, particularly in emerging or developing democracies. We therefore are prepared and ready to work with all groups in the country and elsewhere to strengthen this vital aspect of democratic transition and ensure that democracy and good governance continue to be instituted and institutionalized in the body politic of our nation. We have no alternative but to do everything in our power to ensure that future elections are free and fair, beginning, of course, certainly not ending with the 2007 elections. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the legitimacy of our young democracy depends on this: free, fair, credible elections. Only as recently as 2 months ago, we convened an international seminar of stakeholders anchored by the American University, Washington, D.C., and examined our electoral system and adopted a number of coherent principles that we hope would guide our future actions to ensure the transparency of elections and continuity of democracy and good governance. Let me assure you that we will continue to take all necessary steps and every available measure to ensure the protection and promotion of democratic governance, together with all its principles, ideals, and standards of behavior and conduct in all aspects of our national life. One of the key aspects of democracy is respect for human rights. Since the advent of this administration in 1999, we have ensured that the rights of all citizens are fully protected. Arbitrary or unlawful deprivation of life of our citizens, arbitrary arrest or detention and other forms of human rights violations, such as torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading punishments, which used to be the order of the day under past dictatorships, are prohibited by the Constitution. Our Constitution guarantees freedom of speech and press, freedom of movement, freedom of religion, and freedom of peaceful assembly and association. The Constitution also prohibits arbitrary interference with privacy, family, home, or correspondence of all citizens, and prohibits the expulsion of citizens. Indeed, there have been instances of overzealous enforcement of the law by some members of the law enforcement agencies, which resulted in the infringement of human rights. We condemn all such instances as completely unacceptable, and at the end of the day, the perpetrators have been brought to book for their actions. Central to the human rights of citizens is the right to change their government. And our Constitution provides us with the right to change our government peacefully through periodic, free and fair elections held on the basis of universal suffrage. However, there have been allegations that such rights were abridged during previous elections. There were allegations of voters unable to register to vote, instances of election fraud, violence, and other forms of electoral misconduct in which all parties participated. The 2003 elections were Nigeria's second electoral experience in 20 years. For 20 years, we had no elections. We could not have overcome all the logistic, technical, procedural, and behavioral complications in just 1 or 2 electoral cycles. Even the most experienced of democracies occasionally encounter certain types of teething problems. We are determined, however, to strengthen the capacity of our election commission, reform the conduct of candidates, truly educate their supporters, and confront all forms of electoral misconduct in future elections. I believe our performance in the coming 2007 elections will be better than in 2003 because already we have got the electoral law under review by our National Assembly. And I believe before the end of this year, we will see a new electoral law which will consist or compose of all these ingredients which will help us conduct more credible elections in future. In an atmosphere of general frenzy about widespread electoral malpractice and allegations of other forms of human rights infringements, it will indeed be tempting to forget our recent experience in the evil hands of a brutal dictatorship. Nigeria is one of a number of countries of the world that paid a dear price for its current democratic freedom. I salute all those who brought to light and point out all forms of human rights abuse. It is only by so doing that we all can remain vigilant and studious in protecting our emerging democratic norms and practices. Our administration is fully committed to building a country where all Nigerians feel a sense of belonging. We are fully committed to ensuring that Nigerians enjoy the freedoms, respect for human rights, and respect for the rule of law that is the hallmark of democracy. Our economic reform. We look around the world and see clearly one of the plain truths about human existence, namely, that there is hardly anywhere in which democracy is firmly planted in the context of rampant poverty and degradation. Therefore, poverty and democracy cannot coexist and should not. Excluding a few examples, one would be tempted to conclude that democracy does not coexist with poverty. However, it might not be as safe to conclude that economic development must either precede or trail democratic norms and standards. All the same, we are acutely aware of the necessity and even the inevitability of a massive, radical, and innovatory reform of our economy. In Nigeria, perhaps more than in anywhere else, there is no alternative to economic reform as much as there is no alternative to democracy and good governance. Excuse me. The first step we took in instituting a credible economic reform when we came to office in 1999 was to admit the failure of government to inspire, much less lead the way to economic development. Government indeed has no business to be in business. And this holds true in no better place than Nigeria. However, we understand that government can put in place the right atmosphere in which business can flourish. With this in mind, we therefore embarked on the difficult but necessary deregulation of the economy and privatization of government-controlled enterprises. The privatization program is progressing steadily. Its final phase will be concluded only with the sale of government shares in all enterprises, including the petroleum and gas sector and ports, refineries, petrochemicals, transportation. The deregulation program too is going on, and we shall never relent despite opposition from entrenched vested interests until the economy is fully deregulated and brought to internationally acceptable norms and standards. What we lack so far is not the resolve, the will and determination to reform the economy now and continue with the reform program in the future. What we lack is concrete incentives by our development partners in the form of massive investment of foreign capital, which the economy desperately needs. We therefore look to the American corporate sector for its active participation by investing both capital and technical expertise to assist us lift the economy out of its present state. The federal government of Nigeria, under President Obasanjo, has taken very courageous and forward-looking steps to institutionalize our economic reform program and make it a permanent endeavor, even after the current dispensation. To this end, we have assembled some of the most talented and committed men and women of integrity and constituted them into an economic management team, chaired by the President himself, and charged with the task of guiding the economic reform process. The team has been doing an outstanding job of transforming all aspects of the economy. They have been affectionately dubbed the Nigerian Dream Team. The process is going on, but already there have been very positive and noticeable changes in many aspects. The deregulation of key aspects of the economy is being implemented with an outstanding degree of success. Our foreign reserves have increased sevenfold since we came into office. National productivity is rising. The exchange rate has stabilized. Interest rates are going down. Inflation is steadily decreasing. And the productive sector of the economy is steadily growing according to our forecasts. But even most importantly, overall macroeconomic management, perhaps for the first time, is clearly definable, rational and sincere, and implemented with great commitment and resolve. There is a discernible new philosophy that the overall interests of the nation and our people are paramount over and above the interests of a small clique of corrupt bureaucrats in partnership with business speculators who have hitherto stultified our growth and held the economy hostage. It will clearly be necessary for any succeeding administration to maintain this current macroeconomic management arrangement for it to guide the continued evolution of the economy in the years ahead. It might even be necessary for any succeeding administration to prevail upon the principal architects of and participants in the current macroeconomic management framework to continue to provide their skills to the nation in order to ensure the institutionalization of the present economic reform and imbibing its principles in future generations of Nigerians. Fighting corruption. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, distinguished scholars of the Woodrow Wilson Center, you know perhaps better than I that our economic reform will have no meaning if we devoted our efforts to recognizing only our institutions and structures with no reference to reforming attitudes, beliefs, and practices that in the first place inform the way in which people run reforming, or unreformed institutions. In order for our reform to be genuinely effective, we must change our attitudes and practices across the whole spectrum of public life. In human nature, changing a bad habit is indeed one of the most difficult aspects of reform process. Neither active nor violent revolutions have easily overcome the negative aspects of human traits, and there are a lot of bad traits around that need changing. One of the most worrisome aspects of our national and public life is the seeming persistence and endemic nature of corruption. The national cankerworm has eaten deep into the fabric of society and corrupted even the most sacred and sacrosanct features of Nigeria's national life. Corruption is said to be massive, extensive, widespread, endemic, and pervasive at all levels of government and society. No noble policy of government or any laudable program stands the chance of success if public resources are habitually and brazenly frittered away and pilfered with impunity by those entrusted with them. Corruption has over the years distorted planning and implementation of policies, prevented equity and even distribution of opportunities and resources, hampered economic growth and development, and gave Nigeria an overall bad name or image. In the words of President Obasanjo, corruption must be fought to a standstill. To this end, we established the Independent Anti-Corruption Practices Commission to fight graft in all its manifestations at all levels of government and society. We are the first government to ever establish such a commission. We reinforced it with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. These two institutions or organs have settled down to business and are doing a wonderful job. We intend not just fight corruption, but also change the value system that made corruption to thrive. Because fighting corruption must be a multifaceted approach, not just one way. We want to pass the message loud and clear that you do not have to steal public money in order to be rich. You need to work hard, and you must work hard if you want to be rich. We also want to pass the message to the current and future generations of Nigerians that for stealing government money, you will not pay in the hereafter. We will ensure that you pay for your actions here and now. We will continue to check corruption and ensure the nurturing of appropriate social attitudes, behaviors, and values that are consistent with the culture of transparency, accountability, and fiscal discipline. We have instituted what we call due process in government expenditure in order to drive maximum value for money while ensuring greater transparency and accountability. Currently, we are trying to codify this into a public procurement law. We also have an extractive industries transparency initiative designed to entrench transparency and accountability in the productive and real sectors of the economy. This is critical, especially in view of the huge potential for solid minerals exploitation, which we foresee would derive far greater income than our current income from the export of oil and gas. We are finalizing work. In fact, a law is already before the National Assembly on a Fiscal Responsibility Act, which seeks to ensure fiscal prudence and mutually supportive coordination among all tiers of government. In the meantime, The Niger Delta will continue to play a vital role in the production of our national wealth. For this reason, we have paid a special interest to ensuring stability in the region. The Niger Delta, where most of Nigeria's crude oil is produced, has for a long time become a hotbed of agitation against marginalization by successive regimes, environmental degradation, and neglect. While all the problems have not been resolved, the living conditions of the inhabitants of the Niger Delta are being improved. One way of doing that is to increase money or income from oil to the Niger Delta states. That has risen from 1% when we came to 13% as of today. We are taking all the necessary measures to ensure continued peace and stability in the region. I wish to assure you that we will continue to engage the inhabitants of the Niger Delta and all groups in dialogue in an atmosphere of mutual recognition of the high stakes involved. However, there are a number of problems that need urgent resolution in the Niger Delta. The first is the recurrent violence that accompanies the agitations for greater resource allocation or control by the region. There is no place for violence in democracy, as violence in any form and for whatever reason is indefensible and unacceptable. The agitators must eschew violence and embrace dialogue as a civilized way of resolving the issues they are agitating for. The problem, to me, is no longer lack of allocating appropriate resources to the Niger Delta, but the continued mismanagement of such resources. That is why it has become inevitable for us to have a Fiscal Responsibility Act which will bring about fiscal discipline by all levels of government in the country. Governments of states in the Niger Delta, as well as the Niger Delta Development Commission, must brace up to their responsibilities and show to their citizens what they have done with the monumental increases in resource allocation to them since the accession of this administration. At this juncture, I want to pay a special tribute to our President for brokering peace with leaders of the agitation, which led to the current state of peace in most parts of the region. We will advance the process forward and ensure that peace and stability reign in the Niger Delta. The second disturbing trend in the oil-producing areas of the Niger Delta is the increasing problem of what we popularly call oil bunkering. In plain language, bunkering is the daylight stealing, or whether night, of crude oil, mainly from pipelines and directly sometimes from oil wells. It is estimated that we lose anything between 100 to 300,000 barrels per day to this nefarious and evil activity. Actually, at the time we came, we lose about 300 barrels per day. But we have embarked on a number of measures to control this. Today, we are losing just about 100. Those who perpetrate it evidently range from those entrusted with the custody and protection of our oil resources to outright bandits and criminals, gangs, complete with their money laundering mechanisms. Just like corruption, oil bunkering cannot be allowed to continue. We shall do everything in our power to ensure that there is maximum transparency in the way business is conducted within the oil sector. We shall also remain vigilant in monitoring the downstream activities of this sector with the aim to prosecuting and completely putting out of business all those engaged in these illicit bunkering activities. Here, I would like to thank the United States for recently donating or supplying a number of medium-sized naval vessels, I think about 5 or 6, to help us patrol the Niger Delta, particularly the coastal area. I wish to add here that the stealing of oil seems to be motivated by two factors. There are those who engage in this criminal and treasonable action as a response to what they paradoxically regard as injustice done to them through neglect and marginalization. Therefore, they bunker crude, steal it, and take the proceeds as a way of reclaiming what ought rightly belongs to them, but which has been officially denied them. This is the way they think. The other group are those who engage in bunkering purely for their selfish personal aggrandizement. They are not motivated by any perceived communal neglect or sense of collective injustice. Most unfortunately, both groups could not perpetrate this monumental fraud without relying on a motley of criminal gangs and outlaws who have no qualms about patriotism and have little or no regard to national interests or the value of the human life. The fact of the matter is that bunkering is another form of terrorism with its negative fallouts, adversely affecting not just the Nigerian economy, but also the entire global economy that so much relies on energy. The money that the bunkerers launder is fed back into arms racketeering to arm greater numbers of illegal militia to perpetrate more bunkering and also to be used during election process. It is a vicious circle whose impact will no doubt be felt beyond Nigerian borders and might even have involved drug running. The United States and the international community must join us to confront this evil head-on and bring to an end this most dangerous phenomenon without disrupting the balance of oil output from the region. In the meantime, to address the continuing tension in the area, we have increased revenue allocation to the oil-producing states as much as we improve the state of infrastructure in the region since assuming office in 1999. In addition, we have engaged communities, the youth, and other stakeholders in the region in continuous dialogue to resolve outstanding issues. While these have helped to reduce political tensions in the area, we have embarked upon them mainly because it is the right thing to do. Let us now come closer to international cooperation. On the international scene, we have been very active in promoting regional trade and economic cooperation, peace, and good governance in Africa and elsewhere. We are the largest African contributor to peacekeeping operations within and outside Africa. Through our Technical Aid Corps, we have been assisting other African countries in a variety of ways with their economic development and the building of peace, stability, and cooperation. As we make progress towards deepening democracy at home in Nigeria, we are encouraged by the progress also being made elsewhere within the African continent to ensure democracy and the rule of law. In this regard, we are heartened by the fact that the wind of change which blew across the globe from Eastern Europe through the former Soviet Union and from Asia through Central and South America at the tail end of the 20th century did not pass Africa by. African countries are working hard through the African Union to ensure that democracy takes root throughout the continent. Nigeria will continue to provide material and moral support for the rule of law in Africa. We take this commitment very, very seriously because we view democratic practice throughout Africa as a first step towards a real rebirth of the continent, a true African renaissance. Indeed, there can be no lasting peace and security in the African continent without democracy, good governance, and the rule of law. Let me, in conclusion, my dear friends, distinguished scholars of the Woodrow Wilson Center, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, assure you that we are determined to provide real leadership in transforming Nigeria in as much as Nigeria is determined to provide real leadership to the African continent. We are determined to carry through the reform of our economy and our society to the logical conclusion. We are equally determined to do what is right for our people, however unpopular it may be in the short run. In this regard, I and indeed all Nigerians commend our President Obasanjo, for his visionary leadership, his courage in confronting historically very, very difficult issues, and determination to leave a legacy for the future leadership of our country to build upon and advance. Even attacks on his person in the media by critics of our reform efforts are still weighed down by a huge debt overhang, not to talk of huge personal liabilities. When we come to the issue of debt, let me give you some telling statistics on our debt burden. Our debt service payments to external creditors last year amounted to $1.8 billion US. This $1.8 billion US is 11 times the recurrent budgetary allocation to health and about 5 times the recurrent budgetary allocation to education. Of this amount, $1 billion was paid to the Paris Club alone. That $1 billion, that figure of $1 billion, is over 85% of the federal recurrent plus capital budget for health and education, and over 280% of the capital budget for these sectors all. Yet the $1.8 billion we paid, which we actually paid to external creditors, was much less than the $2.9 billion US which was due for that year. If we had paid the $2.9 billion US, perhaps we would have brought the government to a standstill. And this excludes arrears, which amounted to $3.36 billion US. Clearly, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Nigeria's debt is unsustainable at this level of repayment. The recently released report of the UK Commission for Africa calls for 100% debt relief for poor countries in Africa. Our receipts from oil notwithstanding, given Nigeria's large population, on a per capita basis, we are still a very poor country. Without significant debt relief, it is unlikely that we will be able to achieve the internationally set Millennium Development Goal of reducing poverty by half by the year 2015. I just don't see how we can achieve that. So, what can you do to help us? You can assist us simply with a debt relief. Let me end the whole of this long lecture by a personal story. I lost my father when I was 9 years old. And the only issue of my parents, both my father and mother. But I was determined not to let that setback or my mother's poverty become a permanent disability to me. I was determined to continue with my education in order to improve myself. So I took odd jobs in order to support my mother, who was single-mindedly determined to see me through secondary education and to a university. It was very difficult, very difficult. My parents' friends, many of whom were Christians, supported me. I went on to have a successful career in the Nigerian public service before going into business, where I started and established several companies and enterprises which were very successful. I eventually joined politics and the democracy movement to help free my country and return it to democratic civilian rule. I am one of few Nigerians who refuse to take any appointment under any military dictatorship. We had to fight a murderous dictatorship, and I lost a number of very, very close and dear friends and compatriots in that process. I myself nearly lost my life and eventually exiled to the United States in 1995. After the fall of that murderous dictatorship, I returned to Nigeria and successfully contested for the governorship of my state, and then became the running mate of President Obasanjo. We won in 1999 and were re-elected in 2003. Surviving the extent of the poverty I grew up in and coming this far greatly informed my belief that we live in a country of good people, a country of immense opportunities just like the United States. And that's why we try to copy you in everything we do. Don't blame us. We only need to work harder in Nigeria with vision, focus, and determination to build a country of endless opportunities and possibilities for its citizens. That is what our government has been trying to do since 1999. And that is what we plan to continue to do in the years ahead, with support and encouragement from our friends and the international community. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me finally thank you all for your very rapt attention, even though some of you fell a little bit. I extend the appreciation of all members of my delegation to Woodrow Wilson Center for the wonderful reception we have received. But most importantly to me personally, the center provided me an opportunity to meet with my teacher, an American Peace Corps, in 1962, who was in Nigeria as a Peace Corps, a young Peace Corps, today at this center. So I remain eternally grateful to Woodrow Wilson Center, and thank you for your attention.
Mention the name of your Peace Corps.
Okay.
Do you want to take some questions?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Yes.
You want to just?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let you sit down and
All right.
answer the questions. Mr. Vice President, thank you very, very much for a very thorough and comprehensive policy speech on developments in Nigeria. The Vice President has agreed to take questions from the audience. There are microphones on the left and the right. Please identify yourself as I recognize you for questions, and I ask that the questions, in fact, be just that, questions and not long commentaries and editorials, but questions, yes. If I could, I'll start off by asking the first question of the Vice President. He's likely to get a large number of questions on the economy, on governance issues, on issues of corruption and oil. I'd like to ask you a very short question about democracy and the future. There are a number of reports and rumors that have been carried in the press that suggest that President Obasanjo might be thinking about encouraging a change in the Constitution that would allow for him to run for a third term in office. You have spoken a great deal about your strong adherence to democratic and constitutional rule, and your own biography is a statement of the determination to see democracy return to your country. My question is what do you think of this idea, and would you support it? Mr. Vice President?
Yes, I'm very much aware of the question you have asked, because it's a recurrent question in Nigeria. But the president has always denied that he has any ambition to go for a third term in office. The most recent denial was 2 days ago, when he had to answer questions on a phone-in program from his farm. And he emphatically says he is not going to run, even if prompted to run for a third term of office. I think that is the best reply I can give to that question. Well, this is a Nigerian paper this day which says, again, Obasanjo denies hidden agenda. I cannot also deny that there is no conference going on, possibly with a recommendation that some aspects of the Constitution be amended. Yes, such a conference is going on, and it is expected to wind up the end of this month. And the report will be given to the National Assembly, whose responsibility is to amend our Constitution. But then our Constitution, as I said, is fashioned on the U.S. Constitution. Constitutional amendments are very, very difficult, very, very protracted, and they take time. I do not see the possibility of the current Constitution being amended between now and 2007. And if you have to amend this Constitution, then you have to amend it before the end of this year. Because by next year, we begin campaigns for 2007. So practically, I do not see that possibility taking place. We may have recommendations for some aspects of the Constitution to be amended, quite all right, but I do not see that happening. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, on the left, on the right, sorry.
Mr. Vice President,
Thank you.
there is ferment in Togo, and Faure Nyasimbe has won the election. The opposition is refusing to concede defeat. Nigeria has endorsed the election results. What next?
What next? Before I left, I know the president met both parties. That was last Monday. And what they are discussing about is a government of national unity. That is perhaps the only thing that can save Togo for now. And of course, within the government of national unity, there must be real power sharing. I think just not mere government of national unity, but there must be real power sharing within the government of national unity. Because what is happening in Togo, or what has happened in Togo, is the late Eyadema, of course, coming from a tiny northern minority in the north of the country, seizing power, I think ruling Togo for 42 years, without democracy. I think there must be, people must be allowed to freely elect their leaders. This morning I was making a comment elsewhere. I said perhaps what Togo needs is what we have done in Nigeria. There is what we call power shift and power rotation. Prior to the 1999 elections in Nigeria, politicians agreed that for unity and stability of Nigeria, there was need for a power shift. That is, because the north of Nigeria had dominated political power, whether by military dictatorship or whatever you may call it, there was need for power to be shifted to the south. And we deliberately agreed among ourselves, even though we belong to different political parties, we made sure that our presidential candidates in those elections, all of them from all the parties, came from the south. And so that gave the south the opportunity to produce the president. I believe such kind of arrangement may be necessary in Togo, because it was a situation where you have somebody coming from a tiny ethnic group ruling the majority of the rest of the country by force for 42, 43 odd years. And I think we need a political consensus to be able to arrive at a credible transition. If they agree on the government of national unity, but that government must also have a power sharing arrangement.
Sir?
Hello, Mr. Vice President. I'm Damian McLean with Bloomberg News. And part of your visit here in Washington is to discuss debt relief. A delegation recently, a Nigerian delegation in Britain, talked about more than debt relief. They talked about debt default as an option for Nigeria. How realistic an option is this, and how seriously are you considering it?
No, certainly it's not serious. Debt default, certainly not. As far as I'm concerned, is not on the table, not by a democratically elected government, because that's not the most civilized way to do it. Debt relief, yes, and we believe there are very serious grounds, for us to obtain a debt relief.
Okay, here on the left.
My name is Roman Shpak. I'm a student at American University. Your Excellency, welcome back to the United States. I have a question on military reform. How satisfied are you with the progress of military reform? And also, how confident you are?
Military, please?
Military reform of the military in Nigeria. And how confident you are that the military will never again be tempted to take power or play a dominant role? Thank you.
Well, I think the Nigerian people are united on the issue of military coming back to power. I mean, it will be vehemently opposed and resisted by Nigerians. But that is not to say that the military may not make an attempt. If there is no good governance and the democratic leaders are not fighting corruption and allowing things, because in the previous excuses they gave when the military came, they said they were going to fight corruption. They ended up entrenching more corruption than fighting it. So I think with the measures we have taken, economic reforms, fight against corruption, there is no one single government that has done as much as we have done, particularly by creating or establishing the institutions to fight corruption and finding the right people to staff those institutions and implement those policies. No government has ever done so. So we are prepared definitely not to allow the return of military rule again.
Lady in the red.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Julia Yegmo. I'm with the World Bank. You've said a lot about debt relief. You've spoken about bunkering and corruption. But I'd be interested to know what you would consider would unleash the Nigerian economy. What is the one thing, the great leap forward, that in your estimation would release the country's potential? A lot of people talk about roads. This morning you've mentioned health and education. What is the one thing, in your view, that would help us to move forward?
A very difficult question indeed. But if I have to, then I will say power. And the president has also taken very bold initiative about, I think 3 weeks ago, he set up a electricity power generation implementation task force under my chairmanship to see how Nigeria can generate electricity power between now and 2007, maybe up to about 10,000 megawatts. And that is what is before us now. So what we are talking, we say, okay, this additional revenue we are getting from oil, why can't we invest it in generating more power? That is all levels of government, the federal government, the state government, and also the local government, whatever is our share. Okay, let us set it aside. In fact, what we have done, we have forced everybody to set it aside. And we have set it aside and said, okay, why can't we use this additional revenue from oil, to generate more electricity power? I think this one, if you see, since you are insisting on that one thing, that is the one thing that could possibly unleash, the Nigerian destination. Yes.
Lady on the left.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Abubakar. I'm with the African Sun Times. My name is Adam. Could you did tell us that Obasanjo is not running for the 2007 election, but you have forgotten to tell us if you yourself is going to run in 2007. Thank you.
What I insist is that there must be sustenance, there must be continuity. And I believe for that, for our reforms, economic reforms, our fight against corruption and others, we need continuity and sustainability. To that extent, when the time comes, you will know whether I will run or not.
Mr. Vice President, I'm Herman Cohen, retired U.S. diplomat. Thank you for your very informative speech. You mentioned that there is a great need for foreign investment to help Nigeria take off. The World Bank has told us that there's a significant amount of Nigerian-owned money in foreign locations. Do you see any sign of that, any of that coming back?
A lot of it is coming back. Lots of it is coming back. We have seen more than $2 billion US come back last year, and a lot of it is coming back. I think once they will not be asked to disclose their source of income, a lot of it is coming back. I'm very, very optimistic it will come back, because we are creating, a very, very conducive environment for investments. Whether you like it or whether the money belongs to Nigerians or belongs to non-Nigerians, it is the environment actually that attracts the return of that money.
Okay, we've got two questions, and from the man in the brown suit on the right-hand side, and then we'll follow with the...
Lawrence Freeman from Executive Intelligence Review. Mr. Vice President, you're welcome.
Thank you.
The question, coming back to debt. This has been kicking around a long time in Nigeria. I've discussed it many times with people when I was there. Is this proposal now something that is being supported by the government? I know a resolution of the Parliament went to President Obasanjo, I think, last week, and there are delegations here and in England. Are you asking for full debt relief of $37 billion? Is this supported by the government? And how fast do you think this might be implemented? I'm trying to get an
We are serious in asking for a debt relief, but are we really owing $37 billion? Well, the truth is, really, I don't think we owe that much, and I believe we have never been so serious about debt relief than we are today, and there has never been a greater moment for Nigeria to obtain debt relief other than now, because we are doing so much to help ourselves that we need to be helped by others, particularly yourself.
Gentleman in the brown suit standing up.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Welcome to the U.S. We do thank you for your transparent efforts in Nigeria to redeem democracy and move it forward. My name is Barrister Ike Fuama. I'm from the Eastern region. Vice President, the issues of gang wars between the government and those of the Niger Delta gangs has really been a debacle in our own economy as well, and as in the world economy. Vice President, what are the joint venture partners since 1956? What are they doing with the government of Nigeria to put industries in those areas and divert those children who are helpless, who have no jobs, no technical skills, nothing of any kind, to really engage them in some form of technical education or social programs that can divert their attention from oil bunkering?
Well, I think if you listen to the lecture I delivered, I told you a number of things we are doing or we have done to be able to arrest that kind of situation. I believe we need to sustain those policies in the Niger Delta. And the oil bunkering, I have described them. I have described the kind of oil bunkering you are talking about is opposed, to passive neglect or marginalization over the years. Of course, for even industry to be established, you need to provide the infrastructure. You need to provide the incentives. You need to provide the environment. And this is exactly what we are doing in our reform agenda in order to deregulate the economy, deregulate every aspect of industry so that it is actually the private sector, not government, that should set up industries. It is not the responsibility of government to be in business. Government has no business being in business.
Okay, we have two ladies over here, the lady sitting down on the right-hand side.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Vice President. My name is Leslie Fields. I'm an environmental lawyer. I want to know, is the government on track to end gas flaring by 2008?
Yes, the government is on track, definitely. That is why, if you look at our gas development, because particularly the LNG, we have made faster progress than any government in the history of the country. And that is arising from our ability to move in the right direction with the stoppage of flaring of gas. We are very optimistic on that.
Lady here, sitting.
Yes, my name is Mary Mullen, and I was a teacher in Kenya for 5 years. That's what I have, my contribution to Africa. I wanted to ask two short questions. One, is the ICC court going into Darfur to decide who they should indict for war crimes? And the second is Nigeria going to turn Charles Taylor over to the court in Sierra Leone?
I really, because the issue of the ICC moving to Darfur is an international problem, and that has to be sorted out internationally. There are like countries like the United States who believe that special courts needs to be created, and there are others who are opposed to that idea. That has to be sorted out between the United States and the rest of the international community before I believe anything like that can happen. Secondly, why not? We will be willing, of course, we are prepared to hand over Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor came into Nigeria so that we can avoid bloodshed in Liberia and ensure reconciliation and the process of democratic governance. And that is going on track. By October, I believe this year we'll have elections in Liberia. If Charles Taylor is indicted, which I understand he has been indicted, we'll be prepared to hand him over.
This will be the final question.
Quite a burden. My name is Lee DeCola. I'm a scientist at the U.S. Geological Survey, but actually I'm a geographer. My two questions are, did you say that you expect that the other mineral resources of Nigeria to be developed are actually going to dwarf that of petroleum in the future?
In the future, in fact, there is one new development. We have presidential initiative on cassava. When the Chinese told us that the amount of cassava they wanted, we realized we could even earn more money from cassava than oil. Believe me.
So you meant not only mineral resources, but also agricultural resources and other kinds?
Well, yes, everything.
Okay, thank you.
Let me conclude this by again thanking the Vice President for an excellent speech that covered a great deal of ground, and for his willingness to entertain a number of very broad-ranging and in-depth questions. His responses were thorough and comprehensive, and we appreciate greatly his willingness to be here with us this afternoon. On behalf of Ambassador Howard Wolpe, who again is not in town, and on behalf of the Woodrow Wilson Center, I want to again extend our great thanks to the Vice President for spending so much time with us this afternoon and doing it in such a well-informed and informative manner. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You did it. Super. Absolutely. That worked super. I hope we didn't run too much over time.